welcome to another film breakdown. If you're new here, my name is Michael, and today wait, did I say welcome to another film breakdown? I gotta get out of that habit, but welcome to my initial reaction to the 2025 NFL Draft. So I just kind of wanted to go through the round and tell you my thoughts. I posted all my grades for each pick on X, so feel free to check those out. But the first couple or first three picks, I would say, went chalk, barring the trade. So we had Cam Ward going first to the Titans. That was all expected. And then we actually had a trade. The Browns got a serious haul to trade back down to 5 in exchange for the Jaguars moving up to 2. And with the second overall pick, the Jaguars selected Travis Hunter, which is chalk there. I think Travis is perfect. They need a wide receiver on the opposite side of Brian Thomas Jr., and they need a defensive back. Any defensive back they need. And they got a 2-for-1 special. I think Travis Hunter, personally, he loves fishing. He loves, he says he loves just, doing his own thing, being with his girlfriend. I don't know if she loves only being with him, but we'll see. And just hanging out. Jacksonville is the perfect place to do all that. I think he would have probably not been the most happy in Cleveland, so happy for him. And then the Giants, I would still say this is chalk. They took Abdul Carter, who is my best prospect in the draft. I think he's the most talented in the class. The thing is that they already have Brian Burns. They have Dexter Lawrence, who isn't an edge, but he is a trench guy. And they have Kayvon Thibodeau. Now, with a guy like Kayvon Thibodeau, I guess the expression is don't let your girlfriend stop you from finding your wife, right? And I guess you could kind of apply that to this pick. But right after they made this pick, they announced that they were picking up the fifth-year option on Kayvon Thibodeau. So I'm a little confused where that line is going. If I'm Joe Shane and the Giants front office, I'm trying to trade Kayvon Thibodeau for anything and get something in return. Um, but I guess we'll see. And then the Patriots, the rumors about Will Campbell were not smokescreens. They did take him. I guess he impressed on their visit last week to Baton Rouge, so he is going to be protecting Drake May's blindside. I think that's a slam dunk pick. At 5 is where the draft kind of started to unravel. The Cleveland Browns selected Michigan defensive tackle Mason Graham. Now, I think Mason Graham is a great player, but it almost became a popular idea that Mason Graham was going to kind of slide in the draft, maybe into the teens, and instead he goes at 5. And the Browns, I think, were either going to go Hunter or Carter if they didn't trade out, and they get to beef up that defensive line. I mean, an offensive line that has to protect against Miles Garrett and Mason Graham, that is a problem. And I don't think there was any point in going for offense, considering the offense is going to be terrible no matter what. So beef up the defense and then worry about getting a quarterback next year. At 6, draft went back to chalk. Raiders took Ashton Genty. I think if the Raiders were picking like 15, I have a feeling they would have went Shador. But they're picking 6, and remember when everyone drafted Zaire White like third round in fantasy last year, and then he turned out to be buns? They can't have that happen. Especially, they have Geno Smith, so get Ashton Genty, and then get a wide receiver in this deep wide receiver class in day 2. And all of a sudden, you're looking pretty all right there. At number 7, I can't believe this was the pick. The New York Jets took Armand Membu, who is a right tackle. And in my opinion, he's an interior offensive lineman. I don't think he's going to survive on the edge. Um, they took Armand Membu. With Kelvin Banks still on the board, with Gray Zabel on the board, Josh Simmons, Josh Connerly, all of those guys I would have taken over Armand Membu. I am much lower than the consensus on Armand Membu, so that was one of my least favorite picks of the draft. And then immediately following that, the Carolina Panthers take Tet McMillan. And that was one of my favorite picks. Now, I feel like, excuse me, everyone was saying Jalen Walker to the Panthers, and that would have been a great pick too. But I think Tet McMillan is even better because last year you draft Xavier Legette, and Legette doesn't really give you what you were looking for. And you saw a lot of flashes from Bryce Young. The problem is his receiver, I mean, Adam Thielen is aging out. He is, I mean, this next year he could fall off, or at most maybe he has one more year left. So get a bona fide star in Tet McMillan to help Bryce Young. That is really fun. And then I think the New Orleans Saints absolutely had to get an offensive lineman in the first round, and Kelvin Banks not being taken yet, that's a home run pick, obvious choice. The Bears really stunned me with Colston Loveland. Um, I was kind of thinking they would maybe go Tyler Warren, and that was just purely a guess. I had no reason. I think they have a solid above average tight end in Cole Kmet. In hindsight, I feel like maybe Michael Williams was the pick that should have been made, but Colson Loveland is going to be great, and I think gives them a lot of options. And I think he's going to kind of do what they wanted Keenan Allen to do, but to a higher clip, and he's just going to be better. One of my favorite picks of the draft, 11, the 49ers taking Georgia edge Michael Williams. I am probably the biggest Michael Williams fan in the country. His arms like win matchups by themselves, and him opposite of opposite of Nick Bosa is scary. Another surprise pick was the Cowboys taking Alabama interior offensive lineman Tyler Booker. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that Tyler Booker is a bad player, and positional value out the window, this pick would make a bit more sense and wouldn't be viewed as such a weird pick. But when you have guys on still available like Emeka Egbuka and Matthew Golden, who is an in-state guy by the way, and you have nobody besides CeeDee Lamb on that offense. In my opinion, you should have probably taken a receiver or a interior defensive lineman like a Walter Nolan, or a Kenneth Grant who went the following pick to 13 for the Miami Dolphins. I thought they were going Warren, but this pick fits great. I think he's a really good player. I wanted him to fall to my team, so can't fault them for that. And then this was the most chalk pick in the entire draft, in my opinion. Tyler Warren going at 14 to the Indianapolis Colts. They need a tight end. They need somebody who can just like get open for Anthony Richardson. That's what he does. So, good pick. Jalen Walker going to the Atlanta Falcons, staying in state. I like the pick because they need pass rushers. I probably would have went with a bigger one because Jalen Walker is a tweener and I'm not interested in taking tweeners. I would rather have other teams hit or miss on those tweeners, and I'd rather just take a guy that I am a bit more confident in. I had a second round grade on Jalen Walker, which I know is a lot lower than most, so I could just be incorrect, which is totally possible. Another one of my favorite picks was Walter Nolan to the Cardinals. I think that is, I don't want to say a steal because I think they did take him earlier than he was expected to, but I think he's going to exceed expectations. At 17, the Bengals finally addressed something on the defensive side of the football, and they took Texas A&M edge rusher Shamar Stewart. Now, what's funny to me is it is the most Bengals thing to do of all time is to finally address defense, but address it with a guy that hasn't put up real production and is more so just being held up onto this pedestal because of his combine. Realistically, if he had an average combine, he would not be a day one pick. So, like, I understand Mike Green has the off field issues that we don't know what's going on there. I probably would have still taken him or Donovan Ezeraku. We'll see how that pans out. At 18, Seahawks taking Gray Zabel. I think he can literally play any spot on the offensive line, including center. and that is exactly what the Seahawks need. So that addressed it. I think that's a great pick. 19. The Buccaneers took Emeka Egbuka. Fairly strange. I know that Godwin is coming off of an injury and Evans is aging, but I just figured with McMillan there, are you really going to make McMillan a wide receiver four? I really thought they were going defensive back. That's where I thought Will Johnson was going to go, or Jahdae Barron, but then Jahdae Barron went 20 to the Broncos. And I don't think Barron is going to play boundary. I do think he's going to play like nickel or that star role that became popularized in the early 2020s. So we'll see, but they are the best defense from last year, and they added Jahdae Barron, and this is so far Jahdae Barron, Dre Greenlaw, and Talanoa Hufanga. That is a scary defense. 21, the Pittsburgh Steelers did not take Shedeur Sanders. Smart on them. They took Oregon defensive lineman Derek Harmon. I think Derek Harmon's fantastic. He somehow is just always there to make a play on the football. I really think he is a special player. I think he will wreak havoc on the interior, and I think he'll make guys like TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, all those guys, their jobs will be a lot easier. I also think being able to learn from a guy like Cam Hayward, really, really fun. And guess who my player comp for Derek Harmon was this offseason? Cam Hayward. So I think he's coming right in. He's going to play alongside Cam Hayward, but I eventually think he's just going to take over that Cam Hayward role, which is really cool. And then I grew up in the LA area, so I grew up rooting for the Chargers just as much as I did the Bills, because when I was little, the Bills sucked and I needed to root for a team in the meantime that was good, and that was the Chargers. So they'll always be my second team. And they signed Najee Harris to a 1-year deal worth up to $9 million. Now, for a running back, that's a lot of money for a guy that is not even a Pro Bowler. And so you're like, okay, well, Justin Herbert is throwing to Ladd McConkey, who is a great receiver, and then no one else. No one else. Matthew Golden is available here. That's got to be the pick. And instead, they take another running back. So in 2 running backs, they are investing a first-round pick and whatever the contract is for the 22nd overall pick, and then $9 million. I just think that's terrible asset management. I understand that the Hortiz, Jim Harbaugh philosophy is run the football. The gimmick is a little bit much once we reach the point where we're not drafting the best. I don't even think Amarion Hampton was the best overall player. Why not get a wide receiver here and then a running back that you could get 95% of the production that you would get from Hampton in the 3rd round or something, like a Caleb Johnson, who I actually have a higher grade on than Amarion Hampton. I don't know. And then the hometown team, the Green Bay Packers, took wide receiver Matthew Golden, breaking the long spell of not taking a receiver in the 1st round. That's a home run pick. The thing is, though, that the Packers have had those like 4 kind of like above average wide receivers in a really young room for a couple years now. They have Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, and Dontavian Wicks. They're going to have to move on from one of them. I'm assuming that Dontavian Wicks is the odd man out just because he's had the least amount of production. I don't know if they trade him or just demote him or what happens, but I'm assuming he's the odd one out. But then also, if I'm, I would assume Romeo Doubs is the next guy. If I'm Romeo Doubs, I am not a wide receiver 4. Okay? I don't want any part in that. So I understand them needing a guy. So I respect the pick, but they've got some moves that need to be made. They could move those guys and fill out the roster elsewhere. Vikings, I think last year taught us that the Vikings are a pretty well-rounded team, and they decided to take an interior offensive lineman to help protect J.J. McCarthy in former rival Donovan Jackson. I think Donovan Jackson can play left tackle, as he proved after Josh Simmons got hurt, but he can also play interior. We'll kind of see where he lies. I think he's an interior offensive lineman, just based on his size. So, but I think that's a good pick because I think their defense is really sound. If Jade Barron was available here, that's where I wanted Jade going, but whatever. Then the Giants trade back into the first round, and here's where everyone's saying, okay, Shador's going here. Because the reports were, first of all, ESPN was treating this Shador Sanders slide like it was the Aaron Rodgers draft slide. Not the same thing. Shador Sanders is not a generational talent. I'm not even convinced that he should be a starter in the NFL. But they were saying at this point at like the 23rd pick, they were saying the only way that he is taken is if a team trades back into the first round. And that's exactly what the Giants did. And everybody and their mother was saying, okay, this is it. And then the Giants take Jackson Dart, which, you know, I am not as low on Dart as I am on Sanders relative to the consensus, but this is still a crazy pick to me. You could have not traded up and got him in the second round. Um, just mind-boggling decision. Like, not a single team remaining was going to take Jackson Dart, but I guess you're worried about other teams trading in front of you. So from that aspect, I make sense of it. The following pick, the 26th pick, the Falcons trade next year's first to get back into the first round and take James Pierce Jr. This is the worst pick of the night for me. You drafted an edge slash linebacker earlier in the draft, and I understand you need a few. So you couldn't rush the passer to save your life last year. So I respect you going all in on the position. So the options were Pierce, Mike Green, Donovan Ezeraku, and that's really those are the main guys. James Pierce can't defend the run, is undersized, has character concerns, and has no bend. None. You see him win, he is basically running straight up. So I don't understand why that was the pick. Donovan Ezeraku, from all the reports, he's a stand-up guy. He looks better on tape than Pierce, and he doesn't have the character concerns of Mike Green. So I would have taken Ezeraku. I'm baffled by the decision to go James Pierce. Whatever. 27, the Ravens guaranteed them to have the best safety duo in the NFL and probably the best secondary in the NFL by taking Malachi Starks. Starks was a top 10 player for me in this draft, and they got him at 27. Ball hawk. And I think with a guy like Kyle Hamilton, who is more so that star role who can creep towards the line of scrimmage, make plays around the box, it allows Malachi Starks to be that free ranging, ball hawking safety. At 28, the Detroit Lions took Tyleik Williams, a defensive tackle out of Ohio State. That one was a bit of a surprise to me. Um, I could have seen Luther Burden there with the Jameson Williams rumors. I also could have seen um, Jahad Campbell. Uh, their injuries, they had to go defense, in my opinion. So I think this is a, a pick in which they're saying, we don't know how long Aleem McNeil is out. We're in win now mode. When McNeil comes back, these guys can play together in a 4-3. That's my thought process. And for that, I say good pick. Good pick. 29, the Washington Commanders say we need to protect Jaden Daniels. They go out and get Josh Connerly. I think that's great. Excellent pick. Um, Josh Connerly has succeeded every step of his football career, and I believe that's only going to continue. At 30, the Bills select Maxwell Hairston. I was extremely surprised by that. I thought they were going with Trey Amos. I would have, as a Bills fan, I would have preferred Trey Amos. Maxwell Hairston, fastest guy at the combine with 4.28. He's a zone corner, which fits the Bills' scheme, and he's good at catching the football. I also think he fits the Bills in the fact that he can't tackle. So we'll see how it works out. I would have preferred Trey Amos. 31, at this point, it was the most obvious choice of all time. Guy grew up an Eagles fan and is an SEC linebacker, Jahad Campbell, to the Eagles. A team like the Eagles, where Howie Roseman has drafted so well and made so many good signings, that they, like, you look at them, and every mock draft I did, I was like, well, they don't need this position, and they don't need this position, and they don't need this position. And then it's like, okay, you just need to draft the best available guy. And Jahad Campbell was that. Um, you could argue that, first of all, Will Johnson, we have to talk about Will Johnson when I get through the 32, and Josh Simmons potentially, who went at 32. Josh Simmons is probably a top 10 player in this class, and teams were just scared of the injury. Him going to the Chiefs is the most Chiefs thing to happen, and he's going to fully recover and be one of the best left tackles in the NFL. So that's a steal for the Chiefs, one of the best picks of the night. Now, guys who fell, Shador Sanders. I think people, I think out of there's only a few teams that need a quarterback. Out of all those, let's say there's like 6 or 7 teams that would consider drafting a quarterback to start. I would say probably 4 or 5 don't want to deal with the circus that comes with Shador. And then on top of that, he's not a generational prospect. So that combination of things is like, I don't really want to draft him, especially in the first round. So I'm not really surprised that Shador fell. He was like my 50th ranked prospect or something. So, but Will Johnson is like a top 5 prospect for me, and he slid all the way out of the first round. So his leg, I mean, I cannot imagine what his physical looks like. His leg has, like, he's got to have the bubonic plague because his tape is good enough to get him drafted in the top 10, and he has fallen out of the first round. So we'll see how far down he slips tomorrow. I can't imagine him getting to 40. I think he's taken in the 30s. Trey Amos as well. I can't imagine getting past 45. Crazier things have happened, but I really can't see it. So I'm excited for the next few days. This was just a quick little recap. I'll have another one once the entire draft is over. And then I think I'm going to go division by division for draft grades and draft recaps. Like I'll do a AFC East draft grades and go through each team's picks and then do it for each division. But I appreciate you guys for watching. If you liked, please hit subscribe. I have film breakdowns and scouting reports for every single player that was taken, so feel free to check those out. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave them below. And I love you very much, and I will see you next time.